New statement just out tonight from 7 former U.S. attorneys from SDNY, Southern District of New York, these Democrats and Republicans. Quote, as former U.S. attorneys for the Southern District of New York, we commend U.S. Attorney Danielle Sassoon on her decision to resign. Her commitment to integrity and the rule of law reflects the finest traditions of the Southern District, United States Attorney's Office, and the Department of Justice. The department's announced intent to investigate Ms. Sassoon and some of the career prosecutors who served alongside her is a stark departure from those traditions, and that should concern everyone committed to the pursuit of justice without fear or favor. And it is signed by 7 former U.S. attorneys from SDNY: Robert Fisk, John S. Martin, Mary Jo White, James Comey, David Kelly, Jeffrey Berman, Audrey Strauss. After 7 different prosecutors, including Sassoon, resigned rather than accede to the demand to drop the corruption charges against New York City Mayor Eric Adams, that request to the court to drop the charges, it has now finally been made. But charges don't just get dropped on their own automatically because the Justice Department says to. The judge overseeing the case now has to consider that request from the Justice Department. What is that likely to entail? Is this saga ongoing? Joining us now is Lisa Rubin, MSNBC legal correspondent. Lisa, your reporting on this has just been invaluable. Have I explained any of this the wrong way around yet, or have I pretty much got it right?
No, it's all been right, and it's all terrifying, Rachel. Thank you for having me.
What is the judge going to do here? I imagine that the judge doesn't have that much discretion about ultimately whether or not to drop the charges, but presumably there is some process that happens here next, right?
There's not always a process, but if there are circumstances where the judge feels that he or she needs to get to the bottom of a nolle prosequi motion, and that's what this is. This is a motion to dismiss after prosecution has already been brought. That judge has some latitude to call for hearings or other processes that allow them to understand what happened. The most recent example I can think of in the Southern District itself involves a case in 2020 and 2021 where after the defendant was convicted, it came out that the prosecutors had essentially buried a piece of evidence that would have been exculpatory for the defendant. And the judge in that case actually asked for affidavits and evidence from the U.S. Attorney's Office, trying to understand how did this happen? Was this purposeful? Did this constitute prosecutorial misconduct? And while she determined that none of it was intentional, she did refer all of the attorneys who were involved to the Office of Professional Responsibility at the Department of Justice. Those are the sorts of things that are within the power of a judge facing a motion like this, Rachel.
What should we expect in terms of timing, in terms of the response time from Judge Ho and when he might, if he is going to hold substantive proceedings in terms of figuring out what happened here, what caused this huge uproar in the Justice Department? What would you expect in terms of when that might happen and when those proceedings might happen?
I think it's entirely within Judge Ho's discretion to decide who, what, when, how, and why. But I would expect, knowing him, and I will, in full disclosure, Judge Ho is a law school classmate of mine, I expect that he'll move fairly expeditiously and ask everyone to come to the table. And he may even tell them in advance, these are the sort of questions I have around this request and around some of the communications that have gone back and forth. You know, you referred to the memo that Danielle Sassoon wrote when she was trying to explain to the Attorney General why she couldn't do this. That's a memo that many people have said to me that was written for a court. But there may be much more behind the scenes that Judge Ho wants to see, including correspondence or communications between the lawyers for Eric Adams and the Department of Justice that the New York Times reported on yesterday, essentially saying that the Department of Justice was feeding Eric Adams' lawyers, hey, tell us more about how this is an impediment to your boss or your client, doing his job. That might be the sort of thing that Judge Ho wants to understand to determine whether or not there was a quid pro quo here, Rachel.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see what the judge decides to do here, but there's a very real possibility that this saga is not over and that this, at the very outset of the Trump Justice Department, may be something that haunts them seriously for a long way from now. Lisa Rubin, MSNBC legal correspondent, working triple time as always. Lisa, thank you so much.
Thank you.